You know, I was under the impression that Xbox 360 emulation was a nightmare, both in terms of compatibility and also the means of obtaining the ROMs. I always thought it would be an absolute pain to rip your games library. I thought setting up the emulator was a mess. I thought the games would run like trash. At least, this is what I've heard for years. So I never even bothered. I always talk about emulation on these sorts of various handhelds, and I always stop at GameCube emulation. Sometimes I go up to Switch emulation, but never the generations in between. Those are kind of a no man's land. It's like a compatibility nightmare. I just want my games to run good. I don't want to futz around too much, you know? Well, recently, some very smart developers took Sonic Unleashed, a game stuck in the 7th console generation, and they recompiled it for PC. And they laid out all the tools for you to do it yourself pretty easily. This opens the door up for other games to be recompiled in the future. Some of the legwork has been done already, but there's still a decently long way to go. Sonic Unleashed might be plug and play right now, but no other game is exactly plug and play when you're talking about recompilation. Not at least until some other smart developers basically reverse engineer every other game one at a time. However, you can just emulate most Xbox 360 games. Most of them work surprisingly well with surprisingly easy to use patches that get you higher frame rate, modern aspect ratios, and sometimes higher resolutions, and more depending on the game. The Xenon emulator has come a really long way since those compatibility nightmares I once heard about. And best of all, you don't even need to hack your Xbox 360 anymore. You don't even need a specific program to read your Xbox game files or anything. All you need is a basic external hard drive, and that's it. Everything can be done with a stock Xbox 360 just the way that it is. Microsoft basically allows you to do this. Transferring your games from a physical Xbox over to a computer is just that easy. I was absolutely flabbergasted at how the first random game I clicked on just booted right up. Now, this is still emulation, so there are still some steps involved, especially if you're going to be ripping your games from your own Xbox 360. But it's still not nearly as bad as I once heard that it was. If you've ever used an Xbox 360 before, ripping your games is really not that hard at all. And now, I've got my Sonic 06, a game that is forever locked on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. I've got it on my PC handheld now, along with a lot of my other games that I've been ignoring all this time. Sonic Generations, Mirror's Edge, Gears of War, Perfect Dark, to name a few. Even Sonic Unleashed, which looks even better than everything else thanks to this recompile. This is such a great way to breathe some new life into your physical collection. This video is sponsored by Factor.
Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals let you skip the grocery store prep work and cooking fatigue. Instead, you can get chef-curated, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. And they've even got smoothies and juices and wellness shots.
Factor is the best way to do it. I got Factor on deck and ready to go. I hope this bid was worth all the cleanup and the yelling I will get for my voice. I got Factor. I got Factor. I got Factor. If you're hungry, that's the code. I got Factor.
Factor's my favorite way to have a full meal on deck and ready to go whenever I want. You can try it for yourself by going to factor75.com or click the link in the description below and use code 50YAHUNGRY to get 50% off of your first Factor box and free shipping. So click the link below and use code 50YAHUNGRY.
Factor! I got Factor! I got Factor! Now for the rest of the
are you doing?
It was for a bit. It was for an ad.
What bit? This isn't funny.
It's fun. They'll like it. It'll be a fun little goof.
Can you do something that doesn't ruin the kitchen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I said I'm sorry. I don't know what else you want from me. So today we're going to be taking a look at two completely different ways to play your Xbox 360 games on your computer. There is the Xenon Recomp, and there's also just the straight up Xenon emulator. The Xenon Recomp currently only works with Sonic Unleashed, but it's a damn good port of Sonic Unleashed. The Xenon emulator currently works with all of these games, which is way more compatibility than I thought that it had. And this list is 2 years old. So even games that are on this list that say that they have compatibility issues are fixed now. Yeah, it's not perfect. It still has its quirks, but Xbox 360 emulation is no easy task. I've always understood it that Xbox 360 used a very unique architecture, even at the time. So translating that to modern PCs is not exactly as easy as just running the game as an application. You've got to do some pretty heavy emulating or a complete translation of the code, which is essentially what a recompilation is. There's a great write-up on the Xbox 360's architecture here. If you love reading textbooks, I'm sure you'll just have the best time. Regardless of which method you use, you're going to have to source your games from somewhere. I'd imagine that most people watching this are going to use that one resource that everybody likes called Google. But if you already have an Xbox 360, I promise you that moving your games over legally is shockingly easy. I don't even think this breaks any DMCA anti-circumvention laws or anything, because there don't seem to be any. If you have an external hard drive, you literally just move them over. Now, I do understand that in the year 2025, who's got a USB-A external hard drive laying around? I tried using a thumbstick micro SD card reader. That just didn't work. I had to actually break out my shoebox of old drives. I found this one, and apparently I bought it on Amazon in 2018. I formatted it to exFAT, and when I plugged it into my Xbox 360, it made me format it again. From here, again, it's as simple as moving the games over to the drive. And you can do this for both digital downloads and physical discs. If it's digital games you want to move over, hopefully they're already on your Xbox because the storefront has been shut down. There is still a way to download your purchases, but it is a huge pain in the ass. I had to look up a YouTube video on how to download this game again. You go to My Games, and it's not here because it's not on the Xbox. Game details. Search. And it's one of these long keyboards. Select. It doesn't know what Sonic Unleashed is. Okay. Select. And there she is. And which one is it? You would think it's the first one. But it's not. That's a DLC. You gotta go to see full game. Download again. And then my controller died. Download again. Thank you. But I got a stack of physical games from my parents' house. It took less than an hour to install all these on the external hard drive. The sounds this Star Wars Xbox made did freak my dog out a little bit. What was that? From here, you just take your external drive, plug it right into your PC or your Steam Deck. It can work on both. If you have a Steam Deck, Xenia should come as part of EmuDeck. Moving your games into the correct folder should just pick them right up. Compatibility might be a little worse than what you get on the PC. I'm doing this mostly on Windows using my ROG Ally X because I was expecting some sort of compatibility issues, something I would have to troubleshoot, and doing it on Windows just sounded easier to me. Xenia is the name of the Xbox 360 emulator that's out there. You're going to want Xenia Manager if you're on PC. At least this is what chat told me. This will make your life a little bit easier. Some people run this manager in Wine to get the manager to work on the Steam Deck. If you're fancy, Xenia Manager will download the latest version of Xenia Canary for you, which is, I guess, a more optimized, up-to-date version of Xenia. There's also Xenia Mouse Hook, which is only if you want your mouse and keyboard to control the game, instead of using an Xbox controller. I'm sticking to Canary for most of this. The manager also lays out your games for you with a nice little front end. Although I haven't figured out a way to control this with a controller, which is a bit frustrating. But I can just tap the touchscreen, it's fine. This manager also gives you options to tweak the games, which Xenia does not make that easy. But to just get the games to work, all I did was plug my hard drive in and click on a random file. And it just started playing. I was amazed. All I did was take my unmodified Xbox, move the game from the disc to this drive here, and now I am playing it off of this drive on my computer. The games are just raw on the drive. You can move them if you want. I ended up moving them to a micro SD card with the rest of my ROMs. I'd also recommend doing this just because an old spinning disk drive like this is probably very slow. Just make sure your Windows Explorer is set to view hidden files because the files are hidden on that drive. The games are all identified by their title ID numbers. You should leave them just like that. If you're using EmuDeck on Steam Deck, you can just plop these folders into the EmuDeck's designated 360 folder and it'll just pop right up in EmuDeck. If you are using Xenia Manager like I did on PC, just click the little plus and add the, I don't know, whatever file that is. There's one of these in each folder. I had to do this one at a time, but it shouldn't take all that long. Now, they all look nice and neat in Xenia Manager. It even tells you which games have known compatibility issues and what issues any games might have. There's even a way to add patches. If you right-click a game and select patches, and then go to download patches and click a random one, it'll just download a bunch of patches for the game. Select patches, manage patches, and you can toggle the patches on and off. Some games might have a 60 frames per second mode. Some games might have aspect ratio modes, usually taking the game from 4:3 to 16:9. Not all of these patches work, and not all of them work well, but some of them fundamentally fix issues with the games. A lot of Xbox 360 games don't even run at a full 30 frames per second, so getting a 60 frames per second patch usually helps quite a bit. For example, a game like Mirror's Edge, it says 30 here, and I'm running a 60 frames per second patch. It sits at 30 frames per second sometimes, even with the mod on, but it will jump up to 60 frames per second or close to that in some key areas. And it really is just that easy to get Xbox 360 games to run on your PC or your Steam Deck, I guess. I'm running these off of my ROG Ally X, and it's still surprising just how great a lot of these games work. And it's definitely a blast from the past. I'm just testing games here, but I did get sucked into Mirror's Edge for a bit. I'm also legitimately playing through Perfect Dark Zero. It's a game that I never played. I was a huge original Perfect Dark fan. I remember being very disappointed by the bad reviews of Perfect Dark Zero back in 2005. This game is not bad. It has first and third person. How could people hate it so much? Compatibility and performance is just a little bit worse on the Steam Deck than it is on my ROG Ally X. But that doesn't mean that they run perfect there either, just a lot better than I was expecting. First of all, they're from the 2000s, when rap rock was becoming not cool anymore. But it's coming back. You're looking at games running natively on console at under 30 frames per second, and oftentimes well under 720p also. The patches help, but it can't fix everything. You're also emulating a game that already runs poorly. So there will be frame dips, and there will be crashing. Honestly, games crashed way less than I was expecting. Perfect Dark crashed, but I was using the regular Xenia emulator and not Xenia Canary. It runs fine on Canary. Mirror's Edge randomly crashed on me while I was playing it using Canary, but I just picked up my save where I left off and everything was fine. When I was reading up on this emulator, it seemed like people were having crashes all of the time. I'd imagine that crashes have been happening less and less over time as the emulator has gotten better and better. I'm just amazed at the compatibility here. Basically, everything that I tried worked just fine, with the exception of Splosion Man, which is very disappointing because I really liked Remember Splosion Man? I've seen people getting it to work, but it just doesn't load past the title screen for me, which is a shame. I want to play this game.
I did manage to get past the title screen in Splosion Man on the Steam Deck somehow, but it doesn't take long for that game to crash. I hope this game gets a little more optimized. I'd imagine there's not much demand for Splosion Man. Every other game that I tried was playable, and these patches do definitely help. But music did cut out every so often in a couple of games. Also, frame dips seem to be pretty normal, especially if you're running a 60 frames per second mod, which I did on pretty much every game that I played. But considering this is emulation, it's all running pretty damn good. I'm still pretty impressed with everything here. And I did not see as many crashes as I thought I would, but maybe if I play longer into some of these games, I will. Of all the games that I tried, Red Dead Redemption might have run the worst, but I didn't have any patches on. There is an unlock frame rate patch, which I don't want to do, but there's a lot of other ones like no trees, which is apparently the performance mode. And you can disable shadows. You can even internally render it at 360p if you really want to get this thing to work. So you can mess around with it to get it to run pretty good. I'd imagine you could play the whole game. It'll just probably be sub 30 unless you do some of these optimization patches. I'm gonna dump a lot more games on here after this. I didn't try Catherine yet because I actually want to play that game. So I'm saving myself for that.
You could probably expect some weird glitches every so often. For example, I was warned that Sonic Unleashed's first level has a massive glitch that breaks the game. But just like, get good and you'll figure it out.
Easy though. It's easy. Once you get past that, it's just like a little difficulty patch that I added. When I was playing Sonic Generations on the first level, I did run into a similar issue that I had on Sonic Unleashed, where it had that weird glitch. But you just power through it. You just turn off your targeting computer. It's fine.
Sonic Unleashed also has the most patches that I've seen so far in Xenia. 60 frames per second, 720p, among a bunch of other stuff. That means that this game doesn't even run at a native 720p, which is ridiculous. It's pretty damn ugly, even natively on the Xbox 360. The 60 frames per second patch doesn't really get it up to 60 frames per second, but you know, it does its best. The emulated version of Sonic Unleashed also stutters a bit on my ROG Ally X. So there's a ton of room for improvement with this game. And that's where this recompilation comes in. You can just get it over on their GitHub page. It's just an executable file that you can download and run on your computer. But you will need the source files. You will need the game file, which you should have if you ripped it from your Xbox 360. And you will also need the title update. The title update is the biggest pain in the ass of this whole thing. Especially if you're like me and you decide not to just read the wiki. Getting this title update might only work if you've run the game at least once on your Xbox, and you might only be able to find this title update on your Xbox's internal drive, which is made way easier if you have one of the newer 360s and not one that's definitely been red-ringed by now. The new ones have a hard drive that can just pop right out, and you could just use a SATA cable for that. That's honestly been the worst part of this whole endeavor, and I'd imagine that most people who are gonna go through all of this and want to play this thing are gonna use just a much easier method that everybody's calling Google. If you do manage to plug your Xbox's internal drive into your computer using that SATA cable, use an app called Velocity to read your Xbox's hard drive. And then you just need this file right here. Again, I implore you to just read the wiki. It's like 10 steps, but they're all very quick and very easy. Anyway, once you have those two files, you're in. This port has even more resolution options. You can crank it all the way up to 4K if you want to. You can even completely uncap the frame rate, which gets to be a bit insane for a game that came out in 2008. But even just getting 1080p, 60 frames per second is enough for me. Before playing this port, I played the native Xbox version and the emulated version, and this is light years better than both of those. Not only does it look way better, but the horrible input lag is pretty much gone. Also, this should go without saying, but that level 1 glitch doesn't exist in the recomp. If you want to play Sonic Unleashed specifically, you're gonna want to play this PC port. And I would understand why someone would want to go through all of this trouble to play Sonic Unleashed specifically. You currently cannot purchase it for any platform at all. It's on Xbox's website, but clicking buy does nothing. This is currently the only way to rip it from the clutches of your dying console. And if you have one of the old Xbox 360s, it's probably dead already. This is the perfect example of why games preservation and efforts just like this are so important. Not only are you preserving games for history's sake, but you're also just preserving your own collection and property. These are games that we love and want to keep playing, and sometimes that means ripping them off of the console that they were originally intended for decades later. I am very happy that it's this easy to move your games from your Xbox 360 over to a modern PC. This Sonic Unleashed recomp gives us a lot of hope that in the future, 360 games might run way better on PC. The recomp even works natively on Steam Deck too, by the way. There's a flat pack you can just download as a native Linux app. And it also runs pretty damn good. Just don't try to crank it up to 4K or anything like that. This recomp took a lot of work, but a lot of that work is done already. If you're a developer and you're interested in some other games for the 360, look into the Xenia recomp and see if there's anything you can do to help recompile some other games. Modern Vintage Gamer has a great video on the Unleashed recomp and what specifically will open the door for other games. For right now, us unknowledgeable retro enjoyers will just have to use the regular old Xenia emulator to play all of the other Xbox 360 games. And that's totally fine, because this thing's getting better every day. I've been having a blast just using that. A lot of these games look great on here. And honestly, I like it when my retro games look a little shitty sometimes too. They looked like shit back then, and we didn't care. It's charming. I wish I cared as little about anything now as I did back then. What do you guys think about Xbox 360 emulation? Currently, it works on PC and Linux. It does not have any sort of Android port. You have to use like a translation layer. So I'm not really using it on all these different retro handhelds unless there's Linux on it. And most of them aren't even powerful enough to use it. But for PC handhelds, this seems like a pretty cool thing. Maybe let me know if you want to see PlayStation 3 emulation, which I also hear is a huge pain in the ass. Maybe I've been wrong about that too. Leave it in the comments below, at me on Twitter and any and all this other social media garbage. Hey, you should come to a live stream sometime. It's usually Sundays. People help me out with these videos. I would have probably had a much worse time here without the chat there. So check that out. Also, thank you Factor for helping sponsor this video and letting me make a mockery of myself. Don't forget to check them out. And most important thing you can do, subscribe right here and share this video with a friend who maybe wants to play Halo 3 again. I think that there's servers. Thank you very much. Have a good week.